Feet of Clay is our introduction to another key member of Batman's rogues gallery, Clayface. This was much like Two-Face getting his own 2 episodes to be introduced, though there are clear differences. For example, Part 1 of Two-Face almost solely follows Harvey Dent, while Feet of Clay makes Batman's investigation a bigger part of the plot. Both work very well, but as a 2-part episode, Two-Face is probably superior because both parts are at almost the same quality, while in Feet of Clay Part 2 is clearly the superior episode. Part 1 mostly sets up why Matt Hagen gets turned into Clayface. If all that was needed was to explain how Matt Hagen is transformed, then there wouldn't need to be 2 parts, instead just an extra scene attached to the second episode. We're also introduced to another recurring bad guy, Roland Daggett, who sets all the events in the story in motion. His company creates a makeup cream called Renew You that allows a person to morph their face in whatever way they choose. This is how Matt Hagen gets involved, because he got into an accident that disfigured his face before the events of these 2 episodes. Daggett allowed Matt access to the Renew You formula in exchange for legal favors. This story begins with Matt Hagen in the middle of one of those favors, but the audience is not sure what's going on because Matt is disguised as Bruce Wayne, which is a clever opening. The first scene sets up a great deal of plot, especially Bruce Wayne being framed for trying to murder Lucius Fox, and Matt Hagen getting in trouble with Daggett for failing to take care of Fox due to Batman interfering. The first scene we get with Matt Hagen, completely without disguise, goes into a more mature place for his character than is custom for cartoons aimed at kids, but it's impressive that this level of characterization was second nature to Batman the Animated Series, which raised the overall quality of superhero shows that came after. This scene shows the audience how deep Matt's situation is, because Renew You has addictive properties which makes him feel pain when it wears off. The franticness of needing more of the substance is surprisingly realistic, and it looks like he really needs it, judging from the huge sigh of relief when he finally is able to spread the Renew You all over his face. This leads to Matt sneaking into Daggett's factory to steal all the Renew You he will ever need, but he gets caught, and one of Daggett's goons, Bell, dumps a giant vial of Renew You right in Matt Hagen's face. That explains the why of Matt Hagen turning into Clayface, but one of the things that surprised me was that a good solid chunk of Part 1 involves Batman finding and interrogating Bell to figure out who impersonated Bruce Wayne. It's probably one of Batman's most extreme interrogations so far in this series, clawing Bell out of his car using the Batwing and flying him high above the city. Batman in Part 1 seems much more frustrated than we're used to seeing him, which subtly tells the viewer that Batman is taking a personal interest in this case. The stakes get pretty high when Bruce decides to sneak into the hospital and ask Lucius Fox what he saw, which results in Bruce Wayne actually getting arrested. I remember when I was a kid and I watched Part 2, I was thrown by Bruce getting out of jail at the beginning because I didn't understand that he paid bail. Part 1 ends not only with Bruce being arrested, but Matt's friend Teddy finding him dumped in his car, having been transformed into the giant and grotesque Clayface. After the baby steps and setup in Part 1, Part 2 kicks into high gear, as there is a big sense of urgency with Roland Daggett sending another of his goons, Germs, to kill Lucius Fox, while Clayface is discovering how his powers work and what he's going to do with them. One of the greatest scenes in both parts is Clayface shape-shifting for the first time, because for a brief moment it seems that he could be able to go back to his old life. At the point he finds out he can't keep up a form forever, Clayface breaks down, having lost all hope, which is keyed into having Clayface have a purpose. The only purpose he can have now is revenge against Daggett, which is tragic since Clayface has lost his identity by being able to look like anyone, but never being able to live like a normal person. The episode moves on with Germs, who has an intense fear of his namesake, going to the hospital to kill Fox via smothering before Batman intervenes. I don't think they were able to explicitly talk about killing in Batman the Animated Series, but it's clear what they were talking about when Germs asks, "Okay, Mr. Daggett, who do you want me to take out now?" It did surprise me that the episode went as far as to show Germs picking up a pillow to put it close to Fox's face. In Part 2 we get another interrogation, and I like this one more. I'm pretty sure most fans of this series really like the scene where Batman traps Germs in the hospital's disease lab and interrogates him using a bottle of seawater, telling him it's crimson fever. Not only is this scene funny, but Kevin Conroy is absolutely fantastic here, pulling off the intensity and anger that will make criminals wet their pants. With the first fight between Batman and Clayface, I appreciate that this episode gives Clayface more of a weakness, because shape-changing is like tensing a muscle, and it uses up a lot of energy. Speaking of fights, one of the biggest reasons Part 2 is stronger is that there is much more action, but that the animation can back up these fights, which I will come back to a little later. Batman gets to do plenty of detective work in both parts, though most of it is in Part 1, but in Part 2 Batman has to get information on Matt Hagen as well as study the Renew's properties as a part of Clayface. As the episode reaches its climax, Clayface finally disguises himself as an old woman so he can walk up to Daggett on a talk show and take his revenge. After another very exciting fight, Batman uses psychology as his last resort by showing Clayface images of all the roles he played as Matt Hagen. Having felt as though he no longer has an identity, this tactic works against Clayface Obbeat way too effectively because he freaks out and his transformations go haywire. This is one of the most visually impressive moments of this entire series and is incredibly character-driven. One of Batman's traits that I feel is often too glossed over is that he not only goes against killing criminals, but also makes a point to help his foes become better people whenever it's within his power. This is a quality that Batman the Animated Series brings up more than any other serious version of the character, I think. As Clayface is looking at the images of his various roles, Batman tries to reassure Clayface that his old life is not completely out of reach and a cure is possible. This doesn't work out, and the final transformation scene shows just how shattered Matt Hagen's psyche actually is, though before his transformation he was pretty unstable. It's so bad that Clayface shouts that he wants Matt Hagen to stop haunting him. Another great line that calls back to the idea that he can look like anyone but never be a person is when he can't stop shape-shifting. He's looking at his roles and he says, "I can't be all of them, not all at once." My only real problem with this story is also in this scene. The dilemma with Bruce Wayne is solved way too easily because a few cops walk in when Clayface is going crazy and he briefly looks like Bruce Wayne. What would Batman have to do if the cops didn't see this? Batman couldn't even have possibly predicted that Clayface would transform into Bruce Wayne. I also don't like that everyone takes this at face value and there's no further investigation into Bruce Wayne. It felt way too much like the episode was almost over and they had to wrap it up, which is a bigger problem because this is 2 parts. Despite this, I really do like how the episode caps off with the concept of Clayface not having an identity anymore. Batman is able to deduce that Clayface faked his own death, presumably to be able to give one final performance as Matt Hagen, leading to the final creepy image of Clayface in the guise of a woman laughing maniacally. Another small gripe that I have is not against this episode in particular, but it's that Batman explicitly says that electricity can affect Clayface's body, but in later episodes such as Holiday Nights, Clayface is taken out with an electric shock. Perhaps the next episode Clayface is in Mudslide changed his makeup, but I can't be sure. Speaking of Mudslide, that episode continues much of the characterization of Matt Hagen and how his primary motivation is composed of restoring his identity. I've already mentioned this, but the animation between the 2 parts is vastly different. I don't know why, but Part 1 has a giant black bar protruding from the bottom of the screen. At first I thought it was just my DVD, but that's the way the episode is. The drawing on Part 1 is poor and the fight scenes are not that dynamic. However, almost from the moment Part 2 starts, the story feels energized in a way Part 1 wasn't because everything looks great. Batman's character design itself is much more lifelike, especially the cape and the blue highlights on the black parts of the costume. Anytime Clayface is on screen is absolutely jaw-dropping. All the small fluid-like motions the Clay makes is very realistic looking. When he changes into other people, it looks very good. But when Clayface morphs weapons and extends his body, it looks even better. My favorite visual moment in Part 2 is when Clayface jumps off a building and Batman is not able to snag him, and Clayface just splats on the ground. The music in this segment ramps up the excitement, but this applies to both parts. Clayface has his own musical theme like all the other major characters, and something about it embodies the feeling of the Clayface character. The voice acting is spectacular as usual. Ed Asner is one of the best voice actors in the business, always playing a variety of roles, here playing the corrupt Roland Daggett. Speaking of one of the best in the business, I think Ron Perlman certainly qualifies. The man really gets how to use his voice, usually to play villainous characters, but it's always believable, and he brings that humanity to Clayface. Quickly, I'd like to mention that I think his voice was perfect for Deathstroke, Slade, Hellboy, and the Abomination. I've already mentioned Kevin Conroy, and his performance is fantastic as usual. I haven't meant to mention him in each review, but it's interesting that he can do so many things with the same character, and how the sound evolved over time with his voice. Perhaps the only weakness in the voice cast this episode was the scene where Teddy was reacting to Clayface's transformations. The excitement sounded a little forced there, but it's almost not even worth mentioning. Well, that covers everything for this two-parter. Despite a few quibbles and the slight dullness of Part 1, Feet of Clay is extremely entertaining, and the villain, including his backstory, is executed very competently. I rate Feet of Clay a 4.5 out of 5, though a bit less enthusiastic of a score than other episodes that I've given 4.5s to, because of the ending of the Bruce Wayne subplots, and again, Part 1 is dull. I think it's been a while since we've had a Joker episode, so next week I will return with a review for The Joker's Favor. Hope you guys stay tuned, and I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, the channel has reached over 400 subscribers. I think my count is 406 as of right now. That's super cool. I have to thank you guys completely for supporting the channel, and here's to 400 more, hopefully. All I'm going to say is that I'm going to keep doing these reviews. I hope you guys are enjoying them. Whenever I have time for them, I enjoy making them. And I hope these videos, these reviews are insightful and entertaining. So thanks a lot, guys. I could not appreciate it more.